Hannah and Justin. Let's give them a round of applause.
Hi everybody. Can you hear us okay with just using this mic? Is that working right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you for asking us to come to Iceland and take part in this conference. As Brian explained, we've travelled from England, and I guess we're here because in about 2012 we decided to start our own manufacturing business, a modern manufacturing business as we like to call it, and it's based around a new way of working with wool, and it's called Solidwool. So we're in the business of tangible materials, a bit like the craftsman working with wood that Brian alluded to. And we're going to tell you our story today, and hopefully you'll be able to take a bit of inspiration from that and apply that to how you work with the web.
So what is Solidwool? We explain it in the simplest form as it's a material like fibreglass but with wool. So we use wool instead of glass and bioresins to bind the wool together. If the resin was used on its own, it would just be really brittle and snap. So it's the wool which gives it its reinforcement. This is what it looks like. This is our flagship product, which we made into. So we created a material. So we thought, what can we do with it? We'll make a chair because everyone understands a chair, and it's a great way of showcasing that the material is a structural material that has really great strength, but also a nice amount of flex. We've brought some material with us, just so you can kind of get a feel. So if I show you a bit closer up, this is a Herdwick wool, which we'll cover later, which is a breed of sheep that lives in the north of England. It's a super tactile material, but in a really odd way that it's super tactile, because actually when you touch it, it's smooth, and it's more that visually it's tactile, so it kind of plays with your head a bit, because you see the material, you want to stroke it, but you can't feel the wool, you just think you can. So yeah, that's the material.
So before we talk a bit more in detail about what Solidwool is and what we do with it, we thought we'd tell you our story and how we came to finding this new way of working with wool. And I think one of the interesting points is at the beginning, there was no big idea. We just had a set of ideals. There wasn't even wool. I mean, we were both in jobs. I'm a product designer and Hannah works in marketing. And we wanted to do our own thing, start our own business. And we had a set of ideals that we wanted to work to. And in the beginning, there wasn't even wool.
Yeah, and it was more that we'd kind of become aware of people doing really interesting things, people using their skills for good, and we were in these jobs that we didn't like and really uninspired and thinking, do we just give up on? Justin was like, I don't want to be a product designer anymore, and actually we thought, what can we do with our skills in a good way that's fulfilling for us primarily, but if you do good work, then it by default benefits other people, and came across inspiration like this. It's a guy called James Victore. Your work is a gift, and almost if you start to think of it that way, it completely changes how you want to work and who you want to work for. So yeah, we had all this inspiration, but almost what's the point of inspiration if you don't do anything with it? And almost you have an inspiration curve of really inspired, and if you don't do anything, then you get really dissatisfied and disillusioned. And yes, we were just like, we've got to do something and trust that if we do something, something will happen, even if you have no idea what that is.
So where to start? So we're from this little town called Buckfast-Lee in the southwest of England, in Devon, and it's right on the edge of Dartmoor. And Dartmoor looks a bit like this. It's a national park that's quite barren, to be honest, and has a lot of sheep. You can see these guys here, they're called Scotch blackface. Black faces, horns, really rough, coarse, itchy, scratchy wool. And every day we drive out of the town to go and work, and we pass this sign, Buckfastleigh, ancient woolen town. And that was the spark. That was the beginning. And we kind of wanted to explore what ancient woolen town meant and what Buckfastleigh had once been. This picture kind of sums up today, I suppose. So Buckfastleigh at one point was the epicentre of the wool industry in the UK. There's an abbey at Buckfast, which is like the sister town which sits over the hill. And there's a load of Cistercian monks there, which some of you may or may not have heard of. They're more famous today for a slightly dodgy alcoholic beverage they make. But they farm sheep on the foothills of Dartmoor, and I don't actually know the time frame, but they were the first people to start using wool. And out of that grew a wool industry. And the UK wool industry actually started in the southwest of England, and Buckfastleigh was really at the key. At one point in time, there were, I think, 6 different mills in the town, and they would process wool from the beginning, from cleaning wool, and the town was able to do that because it has a lovely river called the River Dart running through it, and those waters were used to clean the wool, scour the wool, and power machinery in the earlier mills. In its heyday, the town was famous for a particular type of cloth called a serge, which is like a woven cloth, which is like woven and sort of boiled, and it was used by the military. It's kind of like a military cloth, like a very tight sort of outerwear. But as globalization sort of took hold, the industry started leaving the town. The picture, the mill, this is all the same building actually, and that's derelict. It was last used about 10 years ago. Built in the 50s, and that one building alone sort of processed wool from getting greasy, dirty wool in to outputting carpets, which is sort of another interesting point, that the wool on the moor from these sheep with the itchy, scratchy wool, it was good for carpets because it was tough and resilient. But today, that building, well, up until very recently, that building stood empty. We've just moved into a new workshop, and we're actually in the bottom corner of that building at the moment. We're the first people to go back into it and to breathe new life into it. So, yeah, at the beginning we had the town as our inspiration, and we asked the question, could we put the wool back into Buckfastleigh? So at the point, the town was the inspiration, and we had our material to work with, but we knew nothing about wool. As I said earlier, we came from a background of being a product designer and marketing, and we knew how to design product and make product and take it to market, but in terms of the wool industry, it was a material we hadn't worked with before. So we started exploring, trying to learn about how people work with wool in a conventional way, spinning, weaving, and eventually we spoke to a lady called Leslie, who is sort of an expert in the wool world, and we sort of told her some loose aims we had, that we wanted to start a business. We're interested in manufacturing. You know, we want to kind of bring some wool manufacturing back to our town. And she said, "Well, how are you going to do that? You know, you're starting from zero, and everyone else is an expert in using wool. And, you guys have no skills in that world. Perhaps you should consider doing something which hasn't been done before." And that was a bit of a gauntlet thrown down to us, and yeah, we took that and started to set to work.
So these are some of our experiments that we did first off with Solidwool. So we got some wool and started playing. Play was a big part of our philosophy. So yeah, we had the philosophy that if there's an idea in your head, quickly get it out of your head and into the real world, and did loads of random things like got sheepskins, made them into terrible looking chairs, stuffed a bike saddle full of wool, felted wool to create 3D structures. But I think what all of this shows now, when we were in that moment, it would be so easy to say, this all looks terrible. How would any of this become a business? But that was, we gave ourselves, even though ultimately we did want it to go somewhere, we still had day jobs. There was no pressure to make it viable. So having that pressure of an end goal, a commercial end goal removed, it gave us time to play and just see what we could do. And this was 4 months of spare time playing after we started, and we mixed solid wool with, or we mixed wool. This was Solidwool's first iteration, so to speak. So we mixed it with a PVA glue and then just moulded it around I think probably like a glass or a yogurt pot or something, and we were like, we can make wool solid. And it was at that point that Justin suddenly had the light bulb moment of fibreglass. I've designed with fibreglass. Could it be used in a similar way? So from this point here to that took about 2 years to get from first off to a kind of viable production material.
Yeah, so just that's the material as it is today, and sort of first generation of solid wool that you've all seen. And it's kind of quite dark in colour. You know, from a distance it looks dark grey. And that's because of the particular wool we use at the moment.
Which is here. So if you want to have a sniff,
so as with wood, as Brian mentioned, there's an awful lot of different breeds of sheep, and each different breed of sheep has a different grade of fleece, as they call it. And this dark grey, well, it's not dark grey, is it? It's like slaty blue. This is Herdwick wool. So the sheep are called Herdwick. It's a Norse breed, which is now found in the Lake District in northern England. And what's the stat? Like 95% of all the Herdwick sheep in the UK are in the Lake District?
Yeah, upwards of that. They're kind of
Yeah.
within 15 miles of Coniston Water, which is one of the lakes.
So this breed of sheep is quite a small sheep. It's very hardy and lives in the mountains. So it's small, doesn't have much fat on it. So you're not going to, if you're a farmer trying to farm in these mountainous areas, you're not going to make much of a living off the meat of your sheep because they're small, not very fatty, they're sort of wiry and gnarly. And their wool is really rough, really coarse, and today nobody wants itchy, scratchy wool. They want really nice, really fine wool to make clothing from. But there is a community of farmers farming these sheep in the Lake District. And this guy, bottom right-hand corner here, shearing, he's now an author. He's got a best-selling book called The Shepherd's Life, and he's called James Rebanks. Third-generation farmer, is he?
Yes, something.
Yeah, and like his granddad had 2 farms in the lakes, and from his annual wool crop, as you call it, so shearing his sheep, he would pay for the rent on both his farms. But today, James has a similar number of sheep, and he'll probably get £250 for all the wool. So its value, monetary value, is 40p per kilogram. If you're lucky, a big Herdwick tup, which is ram, boy, will probably have 2 kilograms of wool. So if you're lucky, you're going to get 80p from the beautiful wool fleece of your beautiful Herdwick sheep. And if you paid a shearer to come in and shear it, you'd pay him £1. So it's, for want of a better explanation, it's considered a waste product. There are sheep in the UK with fine wool, blue-faced Leicester, Dorset horn, that are used for weaving and clothing. But there's also a lot of these mountain breeds. Herdwick is the lowest value wool in the UK, and the farmers in the Lake District have a tough old time and really struggle to make a living. They make most of the living by selling good lambs as breeding stock, because the part of, or the hardiness is required and bred into other breeds of sheep in lower land areas of the UK. So yeah, it's an itchy, scratchy type of wool. Used to be used for outerwear, outer garments, and used to be used for carpets. But as I said today, it doesn't have much value. But we found, and is this the right point to talk about this?
I don't know.
So we found that being coarse and rough and itchy, scratchy, it's strong. And when you massively compress it, as we do in our process, it makes a really strong composite material. It's rough, so it has lots of surface texture, which means it's got greater surface area on each fibre, which means the glue has more surface area to bond to. So that helps us get a nice, strong, stiff material.
Yeah, it's worth noting that the coaster, or the sheets that we've been handing round, which are 6 mil thick, they probably start off of raw wool, probably 1.5 inches or so of wool. So there's a lot of compression.
And that's a raw wool. That's a wool matting that's already been turned into a non-woven fabric. So at the moment we're getting quite a bit of fibre in there. That's probably half fibre, half resin, what you see there, which for a composite is on par with something like fibreglass. But it's only our first generation of the material, and getting lots of fibre in is a way to probably make a more lightweight material. But for us, one of the nice things about using this natural material is that, much like a cabinet maker or a carpenter would know his different trees, and he has that link to nature and link to the land, we've started to develop an affinity with the sheep and the farmers, and we've been gone to visit James and other farmers, and there's a real link to the land and a real sort of value in understanding where your material comes from, which we are now adding value through our manufacturing process to the material.
So you saw the chair originally, which is our key product in the middle, but here are some other products that we've created. So the way we've kind of structured Solidwool is that we have a range of furniture. So we have, it's a moulded product, so everything you see here is made in a mould. Well, the chair has its own mould, the side table has its own mould, and then we have a big press to make flat sheet, which our placemats and coasters, the bottom left, are made from. So they're our products, and then we've also collaborated with other brands, and to date they've all been made from our flat sheet products. So a wax comb with a Surf brand in the UK. There's a knife maker, so we supply him with little blocks of the material which he shapes in his workshop, and he makes these amazing handmade kitchen knives. And then some concept eyewear. These are some examples. We've also made a surfboard fin from the material, so it works really well because there's a nice amount of flex to the material. And yeah, there's various products in the pipeline. But yeah, this kind of gives you an idea of what can be done with the product. And originally we thought, oh, this is a structural material, we'll make chairs and structural products. But then seeing how people reacted to this new texture is where we've kind of gone into surfaces as well. So it's a material for its strength, but it's also a material for its appearance. And so there's two different applications for use.
Before I go and talk about other breeds of wool, there was something I sort of didn't get to the point on earlier on, and that's to do with the value of the wool. So I mentioned that the monetary value per kilogram is 40p per kilogram. Well, the way that you buy wool in the UK is you have to buy it from a wool merchant. And a wool merchant buys his wool at auction, and the auction is put on by the British Wool Marketing Board, who run a scheme where they gather all the wool that is sheared every year. So a kilogram of Herdwick wool will sell at auction for 40p. We're not allowed to go and buy it at the auction because we're not a registered merchant. So there's only a set number of people that are actually allowed to buy wool. If we want to go and buy that Herdwick wool, we will buy it for at least that 40p with another pound put on top, which the wool merchant gets. So the wool merchant gets a pound, farmer gets 40p. Farmer's reared this animal, he's made sure it doesn't die in the snow on the mountains, and he's grown it into a beautiful animal. So, and he's struggling to make a living. So there's we feel that fibre has a lot of value. So there's something missing there, that the wool merchant makes a lot more money than the farmer. And the wool has lost value in people's, in people's minds. But what we're doing is we have the ability to make a material and make a product that has high value. So we are realising the value in this material. And what we'd like to do, I mean, it's too early days for us just yet. We've only been in production for 2 years. But what we'd like to do, and hopefully we're going to do it next summer, is work with a community of farmers in the Lake District and go to them direct and give them a much better price for the wool than they're currently getting at auction. So we'll cut out the auction system, cut out the wool merchant, and if we paid the price we currently pay the wool merchant to the farmer, he will double, maybe triple what he gets at the moment, and that's because we're realising the true value in this material. So other breeds of sheep, this is the Scotch blackface sheep which we mentioned earlier on, which is found all over the UK, but there's a lot of them on our doorstep on Dartmoor. And this wool would come from the moor down into Buckfastleigh and be outputted as a carpet, and that doesn't happen anymore. But it's really rough and really wiry. It feels very much like the Herdwick, but it's white. And what the white wool does, it allows us to play with colour. So going back to the dark Herdwick wool, you can't dye it, and if you put colour in the resin, you just won't see it. But with the white wool, we're still able to make this really interesting, visually interesting material with all the same properties of the darker Herdwick wool, but by adding colour to the resin, we can make something a bit more interesting. And on the subject of different breeds of sheep, we're really just at the beginning. We started from nothing, and in as Hannah said, within sort of 2 years, we've got a production material, which is a manufacturing process we've developed, and some products we've developed, and we understand our material enough to make the products you see. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. Potentially we could use different grades of wool to make different types of material with different flex properties and different finishes. It's just the tip of the iceberg for us, really, at the moment. So where we are today is we've been in production for about 2 years, and we have our chair and side table as our products, and we intend to keep developing our own products, expand that range. But because we've got a manufacturing process and a material, and we want to try and increase the value of the wool for the farmers and bring some wool manufacturing back to our town, we collaborate with other people. That's the other side to our business. So as Hannah said, we have our own products and like a manufacturing offering. And this photo is kind of quite a bad couple of photos. This was taken on Tuesday this week. This is in a store called Heels on Tottenham Court Road in London. It's one of the most prestigious design interiors shops in the country, and we've been chosen as one of their Heels Discovered designers this year. So, after 2 years in being in manufacture, this is quite a nice step forward for us in terms of sort of coverage of what we're doing.
So So that's kind of the story of Solidwool. And just to kind of round up, we thought we'd list 10 things, 10 learnings that we've made from going through this process of don't know what we're doing to having a production material. So and maybe this is because obviously, you know, Brian's intro at the beginning to a certain extent was like a foreign language to us. It's a completely different world. But there are definite crossovers probably in just ways of thinking about things. So yeah, 10 things we've learnt. 1, act and think stupid. I think we went into a completely new industry not knowing anything about wool, apart from the fact that there's a sheep, it has wool, we wear wool clothing, and that enabled us to ask really stupid questions and have no preconceptions about what wool could do. And I think if you apply that kind of thinking to your own work, I think that can be a really good way. Sometimes we don't want to ask the stupid questions because we know the answer, but actually it can set up a whole different way of thinking if you think of it that way.
Embrace the process. So at the beginning, we did have an end goal. We wanted to start our own manufacturing company, but this really should be embrace the process and park your end goal. And I think this quote from Bruce Mal really sums it up to a T. Process is more important than outcome. When the outcome drives the process, we'll only go to where we've already been. If process drives outcome, we may not know where we are going, but we'll know we want to be there. So we didn't know we were going to end up with a solid, hard material making chairs and knife handles for people. But we got there through not focusing on the end goal and just working in the moment, and as Hannah said, playing with the material we had.
Yep, so, you know, look to the past. You know, there aren't really any lone geniuses out there that had completely amazing discoveries on their own. Everyone is influenced by what's gone before. So we took learning, you know, we wouldn't have had that light bulb moment of, it's like fibreglass, if fibreglass hadn't been created. So yeah, look to the past of what's happened in your industry and then think about how you can make it relevant for the future.
Play. As you saw in the earlier slides, we tried all sorts of things with this fibre which aren't kind of done. You know, we were putting it into balls and putting it in the washing machine, and then out we got a more solid ball. So what do we do with that? We were just playing and enjoying working in the moment.
Develop your own personal viewpoint. Quite early on, through doing lots of reading, we'd come across a similar quote to this, which is about how designers actually, if you kind of think there's factories, well, they kind of start with people designing products or designing things. And so a town like ours used to have a community around wool, and that was from people designing products made with wool. And so that drove what we did, was thinking, can we design something which can end up creating jobs for ourselves and then perhaps some other jobs for some other people, and then create a little community around that. So, yep.
Explore opposites. So from where we are now with solid wool, you know, the power of hindsight, we've turned a fabric and made it solid. But this was a key part of our process, and it was a theme through the play. This was the theme we kept coming back to, and probably tuned by my experience of being a product designer. I kept challenging the material and trying to make 3D things from it. So I was exploring, trying to make something soft and flexible into something it wasn't.
Yep, there's no reassurance with what you're doing, so you've kind of got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We spend a lot of our time being uncomfortable. When things go wrong, because it hasn't been done, there aren't answers. So we were in a tin shed a year ago, and it got to winter, and our resin froze. And the roof leaked, and wool is really hygroscopic, which is what makes it a great fabric when you're hiking.
It absorbs a lot of moisture.
But when you're making it into a composite, it does terrible things. And so we now dehumidify our wool and have to keep it very dry. So yeah, there's no reassurances when you're doing something new. So you've just got to kind of ride that feeling of being uncomfortable all the time.
Understand your materials and always be learning. So as we realised that we could use wool as a reinforcement in a composite, you know, that was one level of understanding. But then we had to work out why it did that, and we're still learning now. You know, our material you've seen here is kind of the first generation of material, and our production process is first generation, but it's kind of already holding us back in terms of the amount of things we can make and the thicknesses of material we can make. So there's an awful lot more learning to go. We can't stand still. But understanding our materials isn't just about the mechanical properties of it. It's trips to see the farmers, to understand the history, to understand why they farm, to understand what they want the material to be, and from those experiences we're adding other levels, other untangible levels into what we do.
Make it beautiful. This is like one of our key drivers, really, and beautiful in the way being more than just the way it looks. Beauty can be the depth of thinking behind something. It can be the fact that what you create has lots of thought and depth and layers to it. So for us, you know, there are flax composites out there, there are hemp composites, and we could have created something which looks similar but made from wool, but we found from doing tests that it just didn't look very remarkable, and we knew that we wanted to almost challenge the way people had come to these kind of bio-composites and come at it from a point of beauty, but that also worked because that would ultimately make it more remarkable.
Yeah, it's worth saying that you know, our material isn't, in terms of the composite world, people always, you know, measure everything against carbon fibre, super lightweight and stiff, and I don't think wool is ever going to make a super lightweight, stiff composite, but it can make a beautiful material, and that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, and finally, keep it simple, stupid. And Dieter Ram's good design as little design as possible. You know, we have a beautiful material, but there's an awful lot in the background where we've gone, avenues we've gone down, bits of equipment we've tried to make, and every now and again we bear this in mind and sort of step back and always take away. We always try and take away complication. And does it need this? Does it need that? Is there a simpler way to do something?
Ta-da! Hopefully that's right. Can anyone say, how do we say
How do you pronounce that? Yeah.
Somebody want to shout it out?
Yes. Yeah, that.
Thank you very much.
It's okay. Thank you.